Okay, so my previous guest is doing really positive things due to a life-changing accident that happened many years ago at work. So I thought I'd follow the same trend with this guest. This is Steve Kirby, founder of SK Life Coaching UK. Hey, how you doing, Steve?
I'm good, Jimmy. How are you?
All good, brother. All good. Thanks for coming on, man. Appreciate it.
No, I'm happy to be here. It's good to talk to you.
Yeah. You've done a few of these, haven't you?
Uh, 6 or 7.
6 or 7.
Yeah, different ones.
Oh,
Maybe
okay.
maybe a couple more. All on Spotify and Apple and everywhere else.
Yeah,
So
yes. So you know what you're doing by now. Anyway, you're used to talking anyway, aren't you? You do a lot of talking. We'll get on to all that though, all your chatting on site and all that.
yeah.
Let's yeah, we talk about the story and the core of why you're here, but let's go right back to the beginning. Beginning of your career. Where did it all start for you in construction?
So I'm now 46, and I started in demolition initially when I was 20. I'd had a couple of jobs leaving school, trained as a joiner, worked in a casino, just went from job to job, but I just didn't like anything, didn't feel it. And then started in demolition locally, and I just loved it. The machine, the plan, the the banter between the guys, everything about it. Being a new lad and being a labourer, I got the piss took out of me a lot. But yeah, it was I just fell straight into it.
Yeah, it's character building, isn't it?
Yeah, so and I did everything basically. I worked for that company. And I'm from Hull originally, and was on a site in Hull. It was a big job, and they had the contract on there, but it wasn't just demolition. They had the civil side and the demolition side. And yeah, I started off as a labourer, and then I kept jumping in the Moxie dump trucks when no one was looking, and then eventually I got put through my ticket for that. Then I got put on the crusher, which I didn't like, but they said I had to work my way up. So I
Why
was
didn't you like that?
pardon?
Why didn't you like the crusher?
Because like now you're not allowed to stand on them, whereas
Ah,
back then I was stood like above the jaws and throwing all the rebar and all the steel out, and
yeah.
the machine drivers always used to just take the piss and throw massive lumps in, thinking it was funny, and then I'd be fighting to get them out. Like safety wise now, it just won't happen.
Yeah.
But
Nah,
but
yeah.
but back then. And then yeah, and it was all weather as well. Like if it was pissing down, if it was snowing, you stood there in all your PPE,
Yeah.
and then I moved on from that to my loading shovel, and then I eventually got my 360 above and below 10 ton. And then basically for 17 years, I worked as a 360 driver operator.
Nice. Yeah. How did you find that?
Yeah, well, it was something to me. Looking back when I was before I got my digger ticket, it was the easier job because you just sat nice and warm all the time, radio playing,
Yeah.
and yeah, when I first started, I loved it. But like anything, the more you do it,
Yeah.
I spent more time out of the machine helping the guys when I was doing, because I got into a lot of groundworks and civils and stuff as my career moved on, and became a site supervisor. And so I found myself hand digging more than I would be using the machine sometimes.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
But
I used to do it myself. You talk about warmth and that. I was a ground worker and I used to drive the diggers and that myself, mainly mini diggers. But my boss is my cousin. He would not get a digger with a cab on, right? So I was always fucking freezing cold or wet. So you'd have like, of course, your seat would be soaking wet, wouldn't it?
yeah,
So you'd have to put a coat on the seat, and then in the winter I'd have to put like a coat over my lap or something because you're just sitting there all the time. You're cold, aren't you? So I was shivering.
yeah,
But every time I always asked him, "Why don't you get a bloody cab, you type bastard?" He's like, "Nah, fuck that."
yeah. A lot of the time, I was in like 20 tonners and stuff. I was in bigger machines, so it was
Yeah,
always all right. And you know yourself, the bigger the machine, the easier it is to operate because you're not
yeah,
getting thrown about everywhere. But yeah,
yeah,
I've spent many hours in mini diggers and stuff as well. So
yeah.
I miss it now because I left construction 6 years ago when I set up SK Life Coach UK, and I kind of miss it. Like when I'm visiting sites talking, which we'll come into, I look across and I think, oh, I'd love to just get in for an hour, just load a wagon or something.
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah,
Could
it's
you do it? You reckon you could do it now? Yeah, still.
Yeah, well, one of my mates has got his own business as a tree surgeon, and he's got a little 8-tonner. He's got an 8-tonner and a little 3-tonner. And on occasion, I've still got my tickets, so I've kept them in date. Not my CIS ones, just my NPOS ones. So if he needs hand every now and then, I'll jump in and have a go. But it's not often. But yeah, I've still got it.
Yeah, nice. You don't really lose it, do you? The only thing you do lose, really, I think, is the fitness, like for the manual work, for the
Yeah.
graft. You know, I mean, I was at. My wife had me at. I got inherited this big, like, bush tree thing, got a massive root on it. She had me out in the dark in the rain the other night, like 2 foot wide and about 16 inches deep. And I was about 15 minutes, mate. I was blowing, man. I was fucked. I was like, fucking hell, what have I done here? Yeah, so it does get you that.
Yeah, definitely. But no, it is. It's a tough industry, and
Yeah,
a lot of people don't maybe understand how hard it can be for a lot of guys out there.
yeah, definitely,
Well, not just
definitely.
guys. There's a lot of women out there as well now. So I'm not.
Yeah, 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 yeah. It is graft. It's like going to the gym all day.
It is.
Um,
I used to go and do that as demolition as well. We do a lot of soft stripping and stuff. So taking all the timber out and the glass and getting the buildings down to bare brick. So you'd be swinging sledgehammers about all day and crowbars and all the older guys would be absolutely knackered at the end of it. We was always staying in digs as well because we was away from home. So you'd go back to the pub and have a pint and they'd and I'd be like, right, I'm off to the gym. Because I've always loved the gym. The gym's sorted my mental health out. And they'd be like, you don't work hard enough. If you've got the energy to go to the gym after a day in demolition, then you're not working hard enough. And it was like, fuck off. I mean, it's a different kind of workout.
yeah, yeah. I mean, you're young, aren't you? You're young and you've got all that energy as well. Plus, the gym is like you release and it releases them endorphins, doesn't it?
Yeah, yeah.
In a way, really energizes you, I suppose.
It
Doesn't it?
does. And like now as a coach, any of my clients who aren't getting enough exercise, I'm not a personal trainer, but I'll give them plans to even press ups and stuff, what they wouldn't normally do. Because I said, even though you feel tired and lethargic when you're getting in from work, it's because you're not doing anything to build that energy. So start doing more physical stuff. The more you do, the more energy you feel like you've got.
Exactly,
You feel.
exactly. I want to, good point actually. I want to talk about all that later. But yeah, so let's talk about. So you're doing your life coaching that because of something. What happened to you to make you want to do this then?
Right. Well, 14 years ago on the 11th of January it'd be. So a long time ago now looking back. But 14 years ago, I was 32 and I'd been working in construction and demolition for 12 years. None of those years as a machine operator. Thought I was a really competent person. I mean, I'd done everything in demolition and civils. Just before the Christmas break, as a team, there was 5 of us, we'd dug out a trench and installed a fire main, basically, a fire hydrant. It was 60 meters of 600 mil pipe. So big pipe, 60 meters of it. I thought on returning to work, I was going to be digging out the next section to bring it around. But when we did our briefing in the morning, we was told that section needed hydrostatic pressure testing before we could move on. I didn't even know what a hydrostatic pressure test was. I've never done it, never seen it. I knew it was basically fill the pipe with water and then pressurize it. And the way it was explained to, we had no training. The only training we had was the method statement and the risk assessment and going through the permit. It was just explained to us. What they did do, they couldn't get a specialist team with it being straight after Christmas. So they brought a guy from an agency they brought in and he had a street works card, and that street works card apparently gave him the competency to overlook it, to watch us and kind of supervise us doing it. Now, on that day, on the 11th of January, it sounded so easy. Fill the pipe with water, put a pump on it, get it up to 28 bar of pressure. And once it gets to 28 bar, it gets passed off, carry on digging the next lot out. Now, we got on site after we'd gone through all the rounds. we did our on-site risk assessment. It was fixed snow. It was an horrible day, but we made sure it was accessible and safe. And then I'm the digger driver, so I don't actually have to do anything, because I can't dig out until this is passed off. So I get in my machine, turn the engine on because it's cold, get the heaters going, get the radio on, and I'm just sat nice and comfy in this little 8-ton machine. And then the guys start pressurizing this pipe, and it's basically a spigot end slotted into the pipe, and it's a compression fitting. So it's got like a welder on the spigot end, push that into the pipe, tighten that up to a certain torque. There's like 24 bolts that holds it in place. And then you've got your flange on the front of the spigot end with 24 bolts. Now, the guys started pressurizing, and after about an hour at 3 bar of pressure, it started leaking at the flange. It wasn't a massive leak, but there was water coming out. So the guy from the agency said, right, stop what you're doing. You need to get in there, get in the trench and tighten up that nut and that ball against that flange. So we had 2 young lads, Anthony and Jordan, both 18, both freezing cold, want to crack on and get something done. So they get in the trench. You've got Jordan sat on the pipe with one spanner, Anthony in front of it with the other, to get the leverage to tighten up the bolt where it's leaking. They tighten it up, they get out, turn the pump back on. Another hour or so passes, it gets to 5 bar, it starts leaking again, different area, so they do the same again. Then gets to about 12:30, it's dinner time, and I hear one of the lads shout, it's got another leak, and it was at 10 bar of pressure. Now, at that point, as I said, we had no training in it, so we didn't know what we was doing really, but something didn't feel right. And I'm sat in my machine thinking, these lads shouldn't be in and out of this trench. No, it's under pressure, basically. So I stopped the job, and it's part of our training. It still is today. If something don't feel right, stop what you're doing, speak to a supervisor. So I stopped the job, and I said to one of the lads, go to the office, see the manager and explain what's happening. So Jim gets in the works van, goes to the office, has a word with the manager, and he said, this pipe's leaked at 3 bar, 5 bar. It's now leaking again at 10 bar. What do we do? So the manager said, oh, what's John said? John was the agency guy. He said, oh, what's he said? He said, oh, he just keeps saying, tighten it up and pressurize it. So the manager went onto St. Gobain's website and manufactured the pipe work. And it stated on their site, this type of pipe, basically, if it's all put together correctly, the spigot end can't come off. It doesn't need a thrust block. It can't go nowhere the way it's designed. So the manager saw that, and he just said, oh, well, if John said carry on, just go and carry on. Go and get it up to pressure. So Jim come back. He used to call me Fatty. He was like, Fatty, get back in your machine. It's all right. Can't go nowhere. So I gets back in my machine. They tighten it up. They start pressurizing it again. And then it gets to 2 minutes past 3 in the afternoon. It's January. It's dark night. So it's just starting to get a bit dark. And we normally finish at 4 o'clock because it's dark nights. And it's 2 minutes past 3, and I hear Jordan say, for fuck's sake, it's leaking again. And I remember looking down, and it was at 18 bar of pressure. We had to get to 28 bar of pressure, so we still had another 10 bar to go. Now, it's taken from 8:30 in the morning till 3 o'clock to get to 18 bar. We've still got another 10. So in my mind, I'm thinking, we're going to be here till 3 o'clock tonight. You know what I mean? I don't want to do overtime. I don't want to be here. Now, at the time, I was about 2 stone heavier than I am now. I was about 16 stone, and I was throwing weights about. I knew I was physically stronger than the 2 lads that was in and out of that trench. I wasn't being gung-ho or anything. I just wanted to get the job done. I wanted to go home. So I jumped out my machine. I said to the guys, give us your spanners, give us the harness. I'm going in the trench. I'm going to tighten up all 24 nuts and bolts as tight as I can get them. If I can get them as tight as I can get them, it's going to stop leaking. It's going to get up to pressure fast. We'll go home at a reasonable time. Passed the spanners to one of the other guys while I entered the trench, and then I'm stood in front of the pipe. And as I reached up for the spanners, the spigot end blew off at 18 bar of pressure. Now, I don't remember a bang or anything. I just remember reaching for the spanners. My next memory is I'm trapped underwater. I don't know where I am. I thought I was in the Humber. I thought I was in the river. I'm getting thrown about like I'm in a washing machine. And I'm not a religious person, but I remember praying to God, please, please, I can't die. I didn't know how I got there. I just knew that I couldn't get out. And I was screaming for my mum. I remember all sorts of thoughts going through my head. My kids at the time was 4 and 8 years of age. Harry was 4, Joe was 8. And I just remember thinking, I can't die. And I felt like I was drowning for a long, long time. The reality is it was probably about a minute to 90 seconds. Now, that when I say it out loud, it doesn't sound like a long time, but you drowning for over a minute, not knowing where you are, believing this is the end, this is it. When the sea of life flashes before you, my whole world flashed before. I thought it's it. But then with that, I felt myself rise up. And what had happened is, as I've reached for the spanners, the end's blown off. It's hit my digger arm, it's moved my digger arm like 2 meters to the end of the trench with the force of it. I think what had happened was there must have been that much air trapped in the pipe that when it's blown, the air's gone first and thrown me out of the way. Because if the pipe had hit me, it had cut me in half instantly. Yeah. So somehow I was thrown out the way, knocked unconscious, landed back in the water, woke up, not knowing where I am. I've got some pictures that you can share. They're on my LinkedIn, on my website, but there's also a live main running behind me, a live water main running at 8 bar of pressure. Somehow the spigot end went underneath that, because if it had hit that, again, no one would have got anywhere near me. So the spigot end should have killed me. Yeah. It missed me. And then somehow the water pipe behind me didn't crack, because if that had cracked at 8 bar of constant water, I wouldn't be here. But yeah, Jordan, when it blew, all the lads ran in different directions to protect themselves, because apparently it was a big blast. And then Jordan looked back and he saw me just laid face down in the water. He thought I was dead. I thought I was fighting to get out. I wasn't. I was just face down. Jordan then jumped in and lifted me out. And as he lifted me out, everybody had run across from different areas of the job because they heard the bang to see what had happened. And everybody is shouting at me and screaming, "Fatty, breathe, Steve, fucking breathe." And I remember looking at everyone thinking, somebody please do something. I can't breathe. I'd swallowed that much water. I was still drowning. And then as Jordan passed me out of the trench, which is now filled with water, as he passed me out, the water dislodged and I was able to get my breath. So physically, I was really, really lucky. My boiler suit, my harness had been blown clean off. My arms had hyperextended and my elbows had gone the wrong way, tearing all my tendons in my arms. I had pipe bedding, so pea-gravel stuck in my face, my chest, my head like shrapnel. I had a cut in my head that needed a few stitches, 6 or 7 stitches. I was battered and bruised from the initial blast. But other than that, I was physically really, really lucky. A guy at one of my talks pulled me aside and he said, "You know, Steve, you've got better odds of winning the lottery than you have surviving that accident." He said, "You are a very, very lucky guy." And it's like, yeah, I see that now. But back then I didn't see that. Like, a lot of what I do now, I share the story with organizations all over Europe, well, UK and Europe, with the hope of getting people to think about the choices they make when it comes to safety. But a big part of what I do is mental health, and that's how I got into the coaching, because when that happened at 32, I was the guy on site. If you came to me and said, "I feel really down, I feel really depressed," I'll be like, "Oh, man up. Just get on with it. What are you going to do? Go home and lay in bed?" It's an excuse to stay off work. That's how I used to see it. Because I hadn't suffered with it or gone through anything, I had down days like a lot of us, but I never actually gone into a depression. I just didn't get it. So I had no empathy.
It's funny you say that. I've spoken to a couple of people in the past, couple of mates at work actually, and they said, "I don't understand depression. I don't really get it, because it's like happy-go-lucky people. I just don't understand depression, how people can get depressed." And I'm thinking, I didn't want to get too deep into it. It was like, until you experience it, you know what I mean? And I wish you don't, you know.
It can be a very, very dark place. And for a lot of I say a lot of guys, but I work with a lot of female clients as well who don't want to talk to people because they don't want to worry them. You know, when they're having these intrusive thoughts and feeling down, and they're putting a smile on their face and telling everybody, "Yeah, I'm all right, I'm good." Now, like, to go even further back from my background, I'm off a council estate in Hull, and my dad left when I was 10, so it was me, my mum, my little sister. So I felt a huge responsibility as a 10-year-old. I had the responsibility to look after my mum and my sister. I became the man of the house. And living where we lived, you had to kind of be physically and mentally tough, because if you wasn't, you'd get bullied, you'd get your bike took off you, you'd get your ball took off you. You had to be a bit streetwise in a way.
Yeah.
So I kind of had that mental attitude, that tough guy. I turned myself into a bit of a tough guy, and I got in a lot of fights and I got in a lot of trouble as a kid. But I carried that on, and then even going into my teens and then into demolition, it's a mill, roughy tufty. They used to call it roughy tufty demolition lads. You know what I mean? It's a rough job and it's a tough job, and there was a lot of banter. But again, it was banter. You didn't talk about your emotions and up until my accident, I just thought that made you weak. If you spoke about your emotions and cried watching a movie, you want a man. You know what I mean? You want tough. But then after the accident, I suffered massively with PTSD. I self-medicated with alcohol to stop the flashbacks, because every time I closed my eyes or smelt water, I was trapped underwater again, screaming for God and praying for my mum. And yeah, it was I can't explain how quick I sank into this dark hole. How I explain it.
So this was immediately after the accident, yeah?
Basically, I went to hospital. Eventually, I got stitched up. I got a load of scans. I get the pipe bedding picked out of me. And then because I drowned and because I had a head injury, they was trying to find me a bed, and it's about 11:30 at night. And I said, look, I don't need a bed. I'm going home to my kids. I could stand up, but I couldn't walk. I could kind of shuffle with help, because it's like during the accident, my boots was blown off my feet. My boots was found like 20 feet away. So there was a fair bit of damage done to the tendons and ligaments in my feet, obviously through the blast. But I didn't break anything, but I could stand and I could shuffle, but I couldn't walk. And I said to the doctors, look, I'm not staying in, I'm going home to my kids. My kids know that I've been in an accident. They're worried. You're struggling to find me a bed. What's the difference whether I'm here or whether I'm at home? You know, and eventually I got my dad to come and pick me up. And I got home at about midnight that night. I couldn't move my arms. My arms were stuck in this position, but I laid with my kids until they fell asleep and knew that I was safe. I was here. But then when I tried to sleep, the second I kind of nodded off, I was back there. All the sounds, the smells, the bubbles. I'm even now. That's why I can remember it so vividly, because it's imprinted. But praying to God, please, I can't die. Like literally crying to a God that I didn't believe in. And yeah, so it was instant. It was that first night the flashbacks started, and then it was the following day I started drinking. I'd always been a bit of a heavy drinker anyhow, like weekends and binge drinking. But I wouldn't normally drink on a school night unless it was a nice hot summer's day or something like that. But straight away, I just said to Katie, get me a drink. We had a fridge full of bigs just at Christmas. I was like, pass us a can. She said, you can't drink. You're on the strongest painkillers that the hospital could give you, for all the injuries. I said, I'll be all right. I just need a drink. But I remember that first drink, and then that was it. I didn't stop. Just carried on every day for months. We ran out of money, didn't know when I was going to be getting paid. We just had Christmas. We lived week to week. I was sending Katie, who was my partner at the time, the kid's mum, to the local shop to get me cheap bottles of 3.5 litre bottles of cider. I think it's about £4 a bottle, something like that.
Yeah, I remember them.
And yeah, I was just downing 2 bottles of that a day just to block everything out.
How early did Katie recognise early doors that this was becoming a problem?
I think she knew, because I wouldn't normally drink during the day, and because I felt I needed that. I couldn't stop shaking.
Yeah.
And I needed in my mind, I just needed something to set the edge off, and alcohol was something I was brought up with. Don't know, like whether it was something bad, something good, whatever it is. Have a drink, it sorts it out, and so I just needed something to stop me shaking and to help me sleep. And then literally after a few days, we was arguing because she was telling me I was drinking too much, and then that went on into weeks. And then my mood, I didn't see it at the time, but my mood changed massively, and I was shouting at the kids for no reason. I was agitated. I was angry. I wasn't sleeping very well. I was having nightmares all the time. Me and Katie was arguing all the time because if I wanted something and she wouldn't help me, I was shouting at her. Like if I needed a drink or I needed some money, I'd be telling her to go and see her mum to borrow some money, or ring my mum to borrow some money because I need a drink. And I remember part of what I talk about when I do my talk is I remember Harry coming. I was under physio because I had to have cortisone injections in my elbows to be able to move my arms. And Harry's 4 and he wants to play with his dad, and he came running at me to jump on me to play. And I physically pushed him away and said, "Fuck off," and got him mum. And he went flying and ran off crying. And I just sat there like it didn't faze me. And then Joe was playing with his toys at the same time in the living room. And I'm like, "You, get all them cleared up and fuck off. Get upstairs to your bedroom. He's done nothing wrong. I'm just taking all my frustrations and out on those around me." And then I remember going and sitting in the bathroom and just started crying, like uncontrollably, just thinking, what the fuck's wrong with me? Why am I being like this? But then I splashed my face and walk out. And I remember Katie saying to me, "Are you all right?" And me just smiling and going, yeah, of course I am. I'm dealing with it. Now, looking back, especially now as a coach and what I've learned, I wasn't dealing with it. I was smiling and saying that I was fine, when the reality was, by that time, I was believing that I should have died that day and I cheated death. A bit like the film Final Destination. I've cheated death. Death's going to come for me. And then I got to the point of thinking, why am I waiting for it to come to me? Why don't I just do it? All of these, it'd be better off if I had have passed away.
Yeah.
And then I started having the intrusive thoughts and ways of disappearing.
Well, you say smiling. They say people who smile the most are normally ones that hurting the most, aren't they?
Yeah.
But do you think the drinking? Do you think it became an addiction, or was it just a coping mechanism?
It was a coping mechanism. I think. I've always been really, really lucky. Like I haven't got like an addictive personality.
Yeah.
So I've never disclosed some of this, but like going back to when I was 19, like late 90s, early thousands, ecstasy was massive. And I was on a weekend, it was cheaper to take a couple of pills than it was to drink.
Yeah.
And I had friends who started on them and then become really bad and went on to speed and become addicts. Now, I was really like, when I wanted to stop, I just stopped.
Yeah.
Same as the years went on, there was a lot of coke going about, and I started doing a little bit in my early 20s. There was a lot of coke going about. But again, I could do it on a weekend and that's it. Just stop. But I had friends who ended up doing it every single day, and some of them aren't even with us no more. I mean, they had big problems when it comes to drugs and alcohol. Whereas I've always been lucky that if I decide to stop doing something, I can switch off. And
yeah, that's good. So we've established it was just a coping mechanism. There's a lot of people who can probably relate to this. Whatever they use to cope, whether it's drugs, I don't know, drink, porn, or whatever.
Yeah, food, porn.
What can you? I mean, I don't know if you were happy doing this, but can you go through what you was thinking, like your emotions while you were drinking, during your drink, and also afterwards once you finished your drinking?
I think the drinking started like late morning, early afternoon, and I didn't even think too much about it. I just needed to stop shaking. I needed to set the edge off. Yeah. In the beginning, I was shaking because of the accident and because of PTSD. As time went on, looking back, I was probably shaking more because I hadn't had a drink for a few hours, you know, like, and my body needed it. But I just thought I need a drink. It'd get to 12 o'clock dinner time, I need a drink. During drinking, I just switched off. You know, like it was just a way of just
numbed you.
Just switching, just everything, just switching off.
Yeah.
But then as the drink kicked in, before I got to the point where I'm wrecked, that's when the darkest thoughts had come. But then them thoughts would stay with me once I'd fallen asleep and wake up the next morning. And then obviously the hangover's there and you're feeling bad. It wasn't so much an hangover no more because I was drinking that often. It was that numbness. But looking back, it's like I had no feeling. Even though I was crying in private and I was feeling so... Basically, I lost myself completely.
Yeah.
I went from being the most confident guy on site to being a shell of myself. Do you know what I mean? And I'd worked out for years since I was 16, and I was told that I'll never lift weights again, probably because of the damage that I'd done. And at the time, as I said, I was about 16 stone. I was a big lad. And now we're talking maybe 12, 14 weeks after the accident, and I have done nothing. I'm starting to feel fat and shit, and like I said, everything just crumbled around me. But as far as feeling, I didn't have many feelings going like while I was drinking.
Did you get like guilt after?
Not at the time, I don't think. No, it won't. I did after the whole thing. Looking back, then I did. You know, like, and even now, like looking at how I used to shout at the kids for no reason, but I also now know that that's PTSD as well as the drink. So, but I didn't know that at the time, and I was just taking that out on those around me. Yeah. I fell out with my mum for like weeks and weeks, and because I fell out with my mum, I fell out with my sister, and because I was arguing with Katie all the time and shouting at the kids, that's why I started thinking they'd all be better off if I had died. And I think the more you drink and the darker your thoughts become, the deeper you go into that hole. That's when them thoughts start to really manifest. And
and then you want to drink more. It's like a vicious cycle, isn't it?
Yeah, it's horrible, and it's a, like I said, before I became depressed, and I'd never gone through it. I was the guy telling you to man up, and then all of a sudden here I am, a shell of my former self, feeling down, depressed, but then smiling at people and saying, "Yeah, I'm all right, I'm good, I'm recovering, I'm all right." So,
so when did it start changing?
Katie had gone to her mum's one night with a boy, or one afternoon with the kids. I'd been sat drinking all day, and then I thought to myself, right, now's the time. You know, like I'm by myself. But again, trigger warning, suicide. But when I started thinking about ways of ending it, I didn't want anyone to find me because I knew that's going to traumatize them. So if my kids walked in the room and I took a lot of tablets, they've got to live with that. If Katie found me hanging, she's got to live with that. So the only way I could think of just disappearing from where I'm from is the Humber Bridge in Hull. It's a suicide spot. People jump the bridge, and then you either get lost in the mud, or you get washed out into the North Sea, or a Coast Guard's going to find you who's trained in that sort of thing. So in my mind, that was what I had to do, because I didn't want to traumatize anybody. I just wanted to disappear, because I thought eventually they'll get over me. Don't know, it's going to hurt, but eventually they'll get over me. And I should have died on that day, and I didn't. And I pissed out my head. I got in the car and I drove to the bridge. And when I got there, because I knew what it felt like to drown, having been trapped underwater. Once I got there, I just couldn't get out my car. I didn't have the balls to do it, if you like. I just couldn't do it. But I just sat in my car for it'd be hours, like at least two or 3 hours, just sat in my car in the car park crying and not knowing what to do, where to turn. And eventually I knew I had to go home, you know, because I knew I couldn't do it. And when I got in, Kate was waiting for me, because obviously she was worried, she'd panicked. My phone was off. I hadn't left no notes or anything. And she started screaming at me, "Where you been?" And because I couldn't tell her where I'd been, because I didn't want to worry her. Look, even though she was already worried, I didn't want to worry her, so I couldn't tell her, and I just said nowhere. I was like nowhere, and she was like, "Where you been?" And then because I couldn't tell her where I'd been, she was getting even more frustrated, and then was arguing even more. And then she said, "Look, Steve, you either ring a doctor and get help, or you pack a bag and leave, because we can't live like this. It's not fair on the kids. It's not fair on us." And I went upstairs and started packing a bag. And while I was packing the bag, I had the most vivid flashback of being trapped and praying to God, "Please, please, please, I can't leave my kids." And then everything hit me, exactly what I was about to do, what I'd been thinking. I was about to leave my kids, and I had a full-on breakdown. I couldn't breathe. I was having a panic attack. Just sat sobbing on the floor. And then Katie and the boys come running in, hugging me. And she said, "Right, I'm ringing a doctor." And the doctor came out to me, and he took one look at me. He said, "Steve, I'm not a clinical psychologist. I'm a GP." He said, "But I can tell you, you're suffering from PTSD. You've got anxiety. You've got depression." He said, "I'm going to get you booked in at mental health hospital tomorrow, and you can get assessed, and we'll get you help." And that was where the change started to happen. Once I knew there was something. He told me there was something wrong. You know, I had depression, I had anxiety, I had PTSD. But when I went to the hospital, the mental health hospital, the following day, I sat with a lady and I told her everything that I've just told you. You know, like with regards to not just the drinking, but I was also gambling money that I didn't have, like online. I was using credit cards that I knew that I couldn't pay to gamble to get more money. I got a loan off the local Provident guy because we needed money for bills and stuff as well. And all of that on top of the drink just pushed me even deeper down into that hole. And basically I sat and told this therapist all of this. And I remember the therapist looking at me with a tear in her eye. And she said, "Steve, I'm so sorry, but I can't help you." And I was like, "What do you mean?" She said, "I'm not qualified enough." And in my mind, nobody could help me. I was supposed to die. And she's just kind of cemented that. And she said, "Look, I'm going to speak to my colleagues and I'll get back in touch later today." And my dad had taken me. I got in my dad's car, and on the way home, I got him to stop in garage. I said, "I need a drink." And he thought I was probably going to get a bottle of water or a bottle of Coke or something. And I got the cheapest, biggest bottle of vodka that I could get on my credit card. And when I got back to the car, he was like, "What you got that for?" And I was like, "I need a drink." And then when I got home, Katie was excited, thinking I was going to go in, and I'd seen this therapist and it was all going to be good. And she saw the bottle of vodka and just walked the other way because she didn't want an argument. I went upstairs, I laid on the bed, and I just remember cracking it open, started crying, and then literally just cried into that bottle, downing it as quick as I could. Didn't take anything with it, but in my mind, I was praying, "Please just don't wake up. I just want to drink this bottle and never wake up." And then the following morning or mid-afternoon, Katie got me up and she said, "You've got to get up. You've got to go back to the hospital." And I was like, "What's the point?" I said, "There's no point." And she went, "There's every point," and like pointed to the kids and put the guilt trip on me and said, "Look, you've got to go." And I went and I sat with a different therapist. And again, it wasn't great, but she taught me the basics: fight, flight, freeze. She explained why I was feeling the way I was feeling. She explained the impact the alcohol was having, because I didn't understand alcohol at all much either. You know, I didn't know what units was for and how many you should have and blah, blah, blah. And she explained everything in a way that I understood it. And then I saw her twice a week for 4 months. I had a couple of, it was through the NHS, and I had a couple of extra sessions to what I should have on my quota, but she felt I needed it. But then I remember on my last ever session, she'd been offering me antidepressants all the way through it. And because of the stigma around them, I didn't want them, because I didn't want to be on them for the rest of my life. And that's what I'd heard. If once you've gone antidepressants, you don't come off them. So I'd always refused them. And on my very last session, she gave me a prescription and she said, "That's there as backup. So if you need it, take it." She said, "But also what I want you to do is I want you to go away and I want you to go and learn about the mind. And I want you to learn about how nutrition impacts your health and your well-being. She said, I want you to look up mindfulness. And I started laughing at her and I said, mindfulness? I said, isn't that all that meditation and all that shit? I said, nah. I said, that's not for me. So she said, look, Steve, just go and look into it, because the more you know, the more you understand, the better you will be. And I was like, all right. And she planted something in my mind, because when I got in that day, I got my computer out. First thing I started reading about was spirituality and guardian angels, because everyone was telling me I've got a guardian angel. You know, somebody was with you that day. And the more I read on that, the more comforting it was, thinking there's somebody looking over me. But again, it was all stuff that I used to think was mumbo jumbo before. I never believed in anything like that. But the more I read on it, I started believing it. Then I started reading about mindfulness and gratitude, and doing a gratitude list in the morning and meditating twice a day for 10 minutes. And in the beginning, I was doing it and I thought, well, this isn't working. It was difficult. But like anything, the more you do something, the better you get. It has more of an impact. And I noticed that after literally probably about a month of mindfulness and cold showers and everything else that was involved with it, my world started changing. My mindset started changing. And that just wanted me to look deeper into it. And then I came across NLP and started studying NLP. Then I came across self-hypnosis and used self-hypnosis to take me back to the trauma, to visualize it differently, which then, doing that over time, helped with the PTSD. So I noticed that when I smelt water, it wasn't triggering. I wasn't panicking and shaking like I was. And that came down to the self-hypnosis. So because of that, I started studying hypnotherapy and read all the books and put myself on a few courses and became a trained hypnotherapist. And by doing, I think all of those things just brought me out of that hole. Yeah. And thankfully, I've stayed out of it. But now, like 6 years ago, I set up SK Life Coach UK. And that was with the intention of, because therapy wasn't great, and it was like, once your hour was up, it was like, right, your time's done, we'll see you next week. I thought there's a lot of guys, especially within construction, who don't want to go for therapy because it's not manly. But if they knew my story, they might come to me and we can talk to each other. Basically, it was kind of, before I knew anything about like Andy's Man Club or all that, it was just one-to-one coaching for guys in construction.
Yeah.
And yeah, it kind of blew up 6 years ago when I started. And then I got asked to share my story with Skanska, which again, I had no intention of being a keynote speaker, but I started sharing my story. And now I've been stood in front of 700 people sharing the story.
Mad, isn't it? Isn't it mad how people's lives can change so drastically?
It's crazy. But I'm not that person I was no more. Like, looking back, people ask me how that accident impacted me, and it's like, part of me actually did die that day. That ego, that guy who was like, oh, man up and got over it, he's gone. And I now know how real trauma is, how depression is, how we all handle things differently. And I also know that no matter how big or strong you are, that is really, really delicate.
Yeah.
And for me now, it shows more strength to talk about your emotions than it does to just man up. Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely, yeah. I want to touch on that actually. But so let's go back. So when you was doing your hypnotherapy training, had you gone back to work at this stage as on the tools, or were you still off sick?
No, I was off work for around about just over 7 months.
Right.
And then I went back to the same site.
Right.
But because of that incident, the principal contractor that we was working for went on to lose the contract. So when they talk about the ripple effects of an accident, like, the manager lost his job in the first few days. He got the blame.
Yeah.
And then the loss of contract, whether they'll admit outright it was because of that, I doubt it. But I know firsthand from the client and people that I'd spoke to that was the reason that they lost that contract. So that accident impacted a lot of people. There was a lot of people who got 2P'd over, but there's also a lot of people laid off and made redundant. And
Yeah. So
that
man, I mean, you say an agency guy, competent guy was brought in. The manager, was he experienced in his field or not?
I'm not 100% sure how experienced he was within kind of pressure systems or all like that. But
no, there was just so what I'm thinking is because as you was talking earlier, you were saying that there's one dude, an agency guy, which is all kind of flags up with me because I think agency, they're not all bad. Sometimes they're not all that reliable, are they? When you're not with you all the time, but really and truthfully, it should have been him, the one who stopped the work rather than you.
Yeah.
Stopped it and making the call and say, let's go and talk to this person, let's do that. But it was actually you that did it. So
yeah, there was a lot of red flags that day. There was a lot of, I mean, we shouldn't have been doing it.
Another thing, should you have gone in that trench yourself as a digger driver?
There was nothing on the permit, on any permits or anything to say that I can't go in there.
Right.
And like I said, we had two other guys in and out of that trench, tightening it up. And for me, I was on the permit, so I shouldn't. Looking back now, I know nobody should have gone near it. But as a machine operator, it wasn't my job. I could have just sat there but I wanted to get the job done. I wanted to go home. And so many incidents now where you look at the investigation report and they ask the guy if it's not a fatality and people survive, and they'll be like, "Oh, well, why did you do it?" And the answer will be I just wanted to get the job done.
Yeah. Because all I'm thinking is I mean, I was the same when I was on the tools. Everyone muck in doing everything and that, but nowadays, particularly on big sites and with certain tickets, especially like the job I'm doing now, the crane driving, you get your ticket. When you go out on site, you just do that job. Don't do anything else. Don't pick up a broom and start sweeping, shoveling, all that stuff. You do that job. But I'm just wondering if it was that sort of scenario with your ticket.
No, it was basically we worked as a gang.
Yeah.
So it was a group of ground workers, me as a machine driver. And like as I said earlier, I hated just being sat in a machine. So I would get out and muck in concreting and stuff like that. I'm not the best concrete finisher in the world, but I'd rather be on it rather than just sat in my machine watching. So I was always the type to get out and muck in anyhow. But obviously that day, there should have been an exclusion zone. Nobody should have been anywhere near it.
Yeah.
But none of that was put in place. There wasn't even a proper risk because it was a rush job. It was, I believe, it was a generic risk assessment from the digging out stage. What had just been slightly adjusted at the end, being amended to include this hydrostatic pressure test, which it's a high risk job, like a very high risk job. It should have had its own risk assessment in itself. But
do you think you say you was on the weights and at the time? Do you think your muscle mass helped you a little bit?
Yeah, I was told basically because of the size of me and because I was knocked out instantly, so my body had gone all limp. Is probably why I suffered a lot less injuries than they reckon. If the other two lads were still in that trench, there would have been a fatality, if not two, because one was sat on it and the one was stood in front of it. So I believe now everything happens for a reason, whether it's good or bad. Everything happens for a reason, and we take lessons from it, and we follow that path. Now, the past is the past, and we can't change it, but we can take lessons from it and become better. And as I said earlier, if that hadn't have happened, I wouldn't be who I am today. I wouldn't be coaching the people that I'm coaching. I wouldn't be working with the organizations that I'm working with. And people say to me, "Oh, to turn such a negative situation into such a positive, you've done amazing." Now, I don't see it like that. I just see it like I had no intention of becoming a coach or a speaker. I just kind of got put in those positions. But now I do it for a living. But I just believe I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing. For a long time, I had imposter syndrome. So when I was stood in front of, whether it was 30 guys on a site or whether it was 400 at a safety stand down where they've got everybody in, I'd be stood there sharing the story and thinking, is anybody even bothered? Is anybody even listening to me? Why are they going to listen to me? Like, I've done a lot of work with like Jason Anker, and I speak to James Gorey, other speakers in the industry, but they're in a wheelchair. Seeing them in the chair is impactful in itself.
Yeah.
And for them to share their story, it is, to me, really, really hard hitting because it's totally changed their lives. Yeah. Whereas I'm physically able. I don't work out like I used to, but I can lift weights. I do have aches and pains. I can't walk far without my feet hurting, but I do look. I can look after myself. I am able. Yeah. And I used to think, why is anyone going to listen to me? But I now realise I am very relatable. Like, a lot of guys, same as me, doing that same job, put themselves in them same situations. Yep. I have been resilient and turn my life. I could have carried on the drink. I could have been an alcoholic. I could be on. My life could have gone in so many different directions. Yeah. Luckily, I had good people around me that helped me turn it around again. And now I'm probably at the age of 46, mentally and physically, I feel I'm in the best place I've ever been.
Yeah, I feel like sometimes we shed our skin and we become a different person. We get a new life. To me, sometimes we don't recognise the person we was before. Sometimes we do. Sometimes we change for the better. Sometimes for the worse. Luckily, you change for the better, and you're using it positively.
I say to all, I've said to my kids right through growing up, and I say it to all my clients now: do good things happen.
Yes.
And for me, karma is a thing. Karma is real. And if you're nasty, if you do anything wrong, if you threaten someone, whatever it is, it's going to come back and it's going to bite you on the ass really, really hard. Yeah. But if you do good things, but don't expect anything, if you just do it for the good of good, then good things will happen. And say my life's gone full circle. Me and Katie split up a few years ago. I'm now married to my first ever childhood girlfriend when I was a teenager. Nice. I'm the happiest I've ever been. Like, she's amazing. My life's amazing. My kids are now 17 and 21 and doing amazing. Yeah. So yeah, I've got a great relationship with all my family, with my mum. Yeah. And as I said to you at the beginning, I haven't drank now for almost 3 years.
Do you still get any flashbacks or anything?
Not as such, but when I do, like just before Christmas, I did a week of presentations in London on HS2. So I'm talking about it twice a day, every day. And obviously when I share the story, I'm reliving it. Now, it does now, I used to get really emotional. I still get emotional, but not as emotional. When I get emotional talking about the kids and how I was with them and shouting at them. But even talking about the accident in the first few years, I'd be shaking. I remember a guy from BAM coming up to me one day after I'd done it, and he was like, mate, he said, you still need help. And because I was in that much of a state after delivering it. And I was like, no, I'm all right. But just before Christmas, I did like 5 days in London. And I remember I had a really vivid dream that I'm trapped and I'm screaming. And I woke up out of breath and panting. And that was the first time that had happened in a long time. Yeah. But I just smiled to myself and I just thought it's because I've been talking about it. It's just a dream. Yeah. The old me had started overthinking it and thinking, why have I done that? Are the flashbacks coming back? And I'd have gone into a panic and the anxiety had kicked in, and then it probably would have gone on and I would have had more flashbacks. Yeah. But I think it's how we deal with our own thoughts and our minds puts us on that path to where we are.
I'll just go slightly off topic here. Before I forget, you mentioned earlier about imposter syndrome and that. So obviously I get people on the podcast, but a lot of people who get nervous and don't want to come on it. And also on my YouTube channel, if I interview people, they say, no, I don't want to be on the video. And you get all like these big macho men who like think they're hard and all that, but get put in front of the camera and they crumble. But it's the same with me sometimes. Like I hate public speaking. I couldn't stand up in front of people and talk. Can you just quickly give a bit of advice on getting over that for people?
I used to talk to myself. So I remember the first few talks I did was for Scanscare, and I've had no training in public speaking. I've watched YouTube and watched a few videos, and I wouldn't sleep the night before because I'd be going over it in my head constantly. And back then, and even now, my presentation, I've got pictures of the accident, and I don't just talk about the story. I talk about behavioural safety and the choices that we make, how we confuse competence and confidence. And I've structured my talk to kind of get everything in there. But I used to go through it constantly, made to the point where I couldn't sleep. And then I'd be driving down to London or wherever I was, and it'd be constantly in my head. And then I'd get there and I'd deliver it. And most of what I'd thought about and wasted all that time of it I forgot, and it didn't come out. So, but my advice to anybody is if you're doing it because you've got something to share, something that you want people to take from and make changes and it's positive, then just go up there and be you. Don't try and be anybody else. Don't watch like videos of other keynote speakers and try and copy them. Just go up there and be yourself, because that's what people want to see. They want someone who's authentic and genuine. Know what you're talking about. Like, don't go over it as much as I did, but know what you're going to talk about and put it into sections like in your head so that you know where you're at. Something else I used to do was like my presentation's about 45 minutes long, but I used to tell companies that, and then I'd be done after about half an hour. And it was because as I'm going through it, I'd forget to add bits. And then, but because I'd passed that bit, I felt I couldn't put it in, so I had to carry on.
Yeah.
I've now learned that the audience has no idea what I'm about to say. So if I miss a bit and I get into the mental health side of it, I can then just take them back and say, and at that point, what I didn't say earlier was this.
Yeah.
And then bring it back again. So you can go anywhere you want with it. It don't matter if you forget something. You can just go. And another bit of advice is because you get a lot of people who are talking, and in between sentences they'll be like, and I did this, and we all do it, and I've probably done it a little bit during this talk. But when you're up there doing a presentation, just look out for them little fluff words that's not needed. Because by taking them out, it just makes you sound that little bit more clear, a little bit more professional.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, that's cool. Probably selfish, really, more for me. I remember one time I went to a writer's, because I'm a writer at heart. So I went to this talk where these authors, some international best-selling authors, were up there talking. And I was at the back. I always put myself at the back, out of the way, hiding. And I had loads of questions for them, but I thought, I don't want to talk.
Yeah, I
I
just think
remember
so.
asking these questions, but one of them, it was about a sensitive topic, and I remember like my voice started going all quivery, my lips started twitching and everything, and I just felt really conscious that everyone was looking at me, and I just crumbled. And then one of the ladies saved me. She just jumped in and started talking. I can only describe it as like a panic attack, you know.
Yeah, just froze. But yeah, it's for me now. Like, I've got a talk in Derby on Thursday for Aggregate Industries, and I can't wait. Like, whereas before, I've just put a post on LinkedIn saying I'm as excited now as I was nervous 6 years ago. You know, like, so it used to be real nervous. Now you know yourself, nervous and excitement is the same feeling. It's just flipped.
Yeah. I watched a little video about that, actually. Someone talk on YouTube, and he said, turn that nervousness into excitement. Actually, tell yourself, I'm really excited about this.
Yeah, same feeling.
Yeah.
So, but
all right, let's get off of that now then. So you mentioned earlier about your kids, right? They're older now, so they probably know what you do and why you do it and what happened and everything. But when they were younger, did you talk them through everything that happened?
Yeah. So they knew obviously about the accident, and then as they was growing up was when I was doing all this kind of self-development and reading, and I was constantly earbuds in, listening to Audible, or I was reading or doing online courses. It wasn't for any other purpose. It was because I was becoming who I am today. But at that time, I wasn't setting up a business. I wasn't going to be a coach. It was all just for my own mind. And like when I started with like practicing self-hypnosis and reading about hypnotherapy, I started practicing it on the kids because nobody else would let me.
Right.
So I'd be doing all the little tricks like keeping your fingers apart and watching them come together. And I'd be saying to the boys, your eyes are getting heavy and you can't open. And they'd be falling, like going into hypnosis. And so they've kind of been my little guinea pigs right through a lot of this.
Yeah.
But it's also been good because we've sat and had them deep conversations around mental health and around ego and narcissism and all sorts of different, everything that I've studied, I've discussed with them. So right through school, from primary right into college, they've both been mental health ambassadors for the school for their years and through schools. So yeah, where that takes them eventually, I don't know. But
I think it's important. I mean, I had a little chat with mine couple of years ago about having a breakdown when I was young and what I used to get up to as a teenager, all the scrapes and that, and I think it's good to teach them to be vulnerable, show your emotions, and so they know. I think it's one way to break this chain and break this stigma that's out there now. I think because something's got to happen.
Yeah, I've done quite a lot of work with like colleges and spoke to that kind of generation, like 17, 18-year-olds. But I know there is a lot more mental health in schools now than back when I was at school. Yeah. But there needs to be even more. And I think the more educated people are around it, the more that stigma will eventually go. And I think it is to a certain degree. Like I know a lot of guys like in the 20s and stuff who are a lot more open to talking.
Yeah.
It's more the 30s, 40s, 50s, that kind of era that I've still got that I'm a man, you know what I mean? Yeah. But people say to me about when I do my talk and how can I stand up there and be so vulnerable, and relive it all and talk about crying and be the way I do. And it's like, because for me, that shows more strength now. Being vulnerable shows strength. And if me being vulnerable encourages just one person to reach out and to talk and to discuss, whether it's something on site when it comes to safety or whether it's the mental health. If seeing my story encourages one person to reach out, then that's why I'm doing what I'm doing.
Yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, I get talking to everyone now, like whether I'm in a supermarket or whether I'm in town, or I end up on a train to London, like wherever I am, the topic always comes to mental health. Like, I'm like, how are you doing? And they'll be like, yeah. And I'm like, no, but really, how are you doing? And
everyone automatically just says, yeah, all good.
Yeah, and then people open up to me. And I did it. I walked the dogs along the coast the other week, and short story, but I've got 2 sausage dogs, 2 dachshunds, and there's a guy with a dachshund, and he's by himself. And as I walked past him, he looked a bit down. He was probably about in his 60s. I said, "You all right?" And he just looked at me and went, "Yeah." And then I went, "Are you all right?" And with that, he just shook his head. And then he told me his wife passed away earlier this year, and he's been planning on joining her, like by taking his life. And I was like, "She don't want you to join her. She's enjoying the peace." Do you know what I mean? It's not your time yet. When it's your time, she'll be there for you, but it's not your time. And we ended up having this talk for about an hour. And then it was all smiles. He was in a real good place. And he said, "Steve, thank you so much." And I said, "Look, I'm not, like, I don't believe in anything as such, but I do believe I'm more about energy than spirits. I believe I'm big on energy." And I said, when we pass away, that energy is still there, still with you. I said, "So your wife is still with you?" Like, she's still there. I said, "She's still in your heart. She's still in your mind." I said, "Talk to her when you need to talk to her." And he said, what do you do? Like, afterward, when we're going our separate ways. I said, "This." And he was like, "What?" I said, "I just talk to people about the mental health." And he was like, he gave me a big hug. He was like, you've maybe just saved me," he said. And then he took my details and went away and messaged me. But it's moments like that that are so rewarding. You know, like that's better than any money or payment or anything else. It's just having that random conversation, and they don't know what you do, but then by that having that conversation, they go away in a better mindset. It's like,
yeah, mate. Yeah. So let's talk about what you do then. What do you do exactly?
I talk.
Oh, I noticed.
I have talked. Yeah, no. So basically, 6 years ago, or 6 years in March, I was working as a manager for my mate's tree surgery company, but I'd been studying the mind and human behaviour for, well, it's 13 years now, but it'd have been whatever it was at that time. And I'd trained in hypnotherapy and NLP and CBT coaching. And one of the tree surgeons, one of the lads was scared of heights. As daft as that sounds, he's an arborist, but he's scared of heights. And we turned upon a job, and this tree was huge, but it just wanted a bit off the top, off the canopy. And he just looked at the tree and he looked at me and he said, "Steve, I can't do it." And I said, "What do you mean you can't do it?" He said, I can't, it's too high, I can't do it. So I said, "Come here." So I said, "Put your hands on my shoulders." So he put his hands on my shoulders. I put my hands on his. I said, "Close your eyes, take a deep breath." And I started just rocking him slightly. And I said, "Imagine you're at the highest point of that tree. The sun is shining on your face. You've got all your ropes anchored in. You're fully safe. You're fully secure. You've done the training." I said, "You know what you're doing." I said, "Just feel the tree moving." I said, you feel safe. You feel secure." And I talked him through it for about 5 minutes, like individual cuts, and got him to use his imagination. And then I said, "Right, open your eyes and get up that fucking tree." And he opened his eyes, he got up the tree, he smashed it, he did an amazing job. Came down a few hours later, he was like, "Steve, thank you so much. I wouldn't have done that if it weren't for you." And I said, "Don't worry about it." I said, "I'll send you an invoice, SK Life Coach." And I had no intention of being a life coach. I said, "SK Life Coach, Steve Kirby Life Coach." Yeah. And he went, "Mate, you should." And at that point, I'd also helped many other people, just again, supermarkets or bumping into them. And then I looked into it and I thought, well, I'd already done a lot of the other courses, but I thought I'll do a life coaching course and then just see where it goes. Mm. And yeah, that's how SK Life Coach UK came about. The UK was only added because when I put it into Company House, there was already an SK Life Coach. So I had to add the UK. I couldn't think of a name. But I've continued to study and now I literally coach people. Whether it's depression, whether it's anxiety, PTSD, or trauma. If somebody there's a difference between mental health and being mentally ill. If somebody is mentally ill to the point then they need a professional, then I'm going to signpost people. But the majority of people that come to me, it's just kind of those intrusive thoughts and that depression. And I'm pretty good at getting people out of that hole using the tools and techniques that got me out. But I also do the one-to-ones are what I'm passionate about. But the keynote speaking, I maybe do at least 5 times a month. So I could be anywhere in the country. Like in January, I'm in Derby on Thursday. I'm in Dartford on Monday. I'm in Lake District on the Tuesday. So I've got a long drive from London to Lake District. But yeah, that takes me all over, and I meet so many different people.
How do people go about contacting you? Is that sort of word of mouth? Is it?
At the minute, most of what I do comes through. Well, a lot of it for now is word of mouth because of the contacts I've worked for over the years. But I've got a website at the moment, which is the one I've used for the last 5.5 years. But I've got a new one going live, hopefully in a few weeks. But that's just sklifecoachuk.com. And yeah, it's LinkedIn. I get a lot off LinkedIn.
What was I going to say? You say you deal with, it's not just construction, you deal with all sorts of trades and all sorts of companies, isn't it?
Yeah, when I first started with the keynote speaking, especially, I focused more like on utilities because that's what I was doing. But what I've realised and what I've done now is I still use my story for the impact bit, but safety and mental health impacts all of us, no matter what job we do. Even whether we're in construction or whether we're in an office. You know what I mean? It's safety's still there. You've still got stairs, whatever it is in that office, there's still risk. So I've now structured it to the personal story is the beginning bit. And then I talk about behavioural safety, talk about mental health. And again, it's probably going to be another full long podcast, but my accident was never reported to the HSE. And the same year my accident happened, Skanska had a fatality. Guy doing similar job, pipe failed at 3 bar, died instantly. Now, if my accident had been reported in the right way to the HSE had done their investigation, a briefing had gone out UK-wide, they may have done things differently, knowing about what had happened to me. Yeah. So part of the presentation as well, I talk about the importance of reporting and communication, because if we don't report something, we don't learn from it.
Do you think people take things away from that? Do you think people listen to all that? You know, like you go in site sometimes and you go into these, I mean, half of these people don't really want to be in there anyway. The companies go, yeah, you've got to go into this talk.
Yeah.
You think, now what the fuck's all this about?
I get that as people are walking in, they're normally like, oh, for fuck's sake, what's this?
Yeah, come on, I've got to get this concrete poured or whatever. I've got this meeting in an hour, and they're thinking, and they just think, oh, it's just another my jump. Or do you think they come out of it and change and think, actually, yeah, all right, I'm going to change now? Or do you think, yeah, whatever?
Again, I used to get imposter syndrome, as I said, when I started. I used to think, I'm one of those guys. I'm construction work. I've been sat in them before, and I'm like, they're probably going to listen to me and then walk away, and then a couple of hours, they're going to forget or go back to what they was doing. But I've been told on numerous sites, like when I've gone back, because I get asked to go back, which to me shows that I must be doing something right if I want to go back. But I'd gone back to one site in London, and it was like a month after I'd done my talk, and I was in the bathroom just washing my hands, and this guy came over and he's like, Steve, can I shake your hand? And I was like, get dried up. He said, we saw you speak when you was here last a month ago. He said, I just wanted you to know that the guys are still talking about your story today. He said, you've made a massive difference. And for me, that was amazing. That was the best kind of testimonial that I could get, because a lot of the time I do a talk and I go away and I get quite a lot of them reach out to me on social media, because I give my details at the end. Because another part of why I do what I do is after the presentation, I'll say to everybody in that room, look, if anybody in here is struggling, no matter what it is, whether it's your mental health, whether it's your well-being, whether it's nutrition, whether it's alcohol, whether it's drugs, get in touch with me through any of my social medias. Let me know that you was here, and I will work with you for free. It's part of this. And it's surprising how many people do reach out. And a lot, even if I don't get people reaching out for help, I'll get people messaging me saying how I impacted them and how they've seen many different speakers and stuff, but they've never seen anything like that. And so definitely has an impact. If I wasn't, I probably wouldn't do it, because it's, and you feel that when you're talking as well. There's certain places where you do a talk and I'm watching the room and there's an energy about it. And sometimes a lot of sites, especially down in London, you get a lot of different cultures, and sometimes the language barrier is pretty tough.
Yes.
And that can be a tough one. And then you're looking around and people are like, it can
not
be
only that as well. You say about these different cultures. A lot of these cultures are, in terms of the stigma, they're a little bit behind. So they're still stuck in that mentality. You've got to be strong.
Yeah.
Blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
So it must be difficult to crack that. But also, what I want to ask is, you mentioned earlier about doing it for free. So I'm thinking, when I spoke to you yesterday, actually, you were talking about some people struggle. So I'm thinking, how accessible are you going to be for the normal tradesperson? You're saying that you might be looking at getting funding for people and that sort of stuff. Can you? Is it mainly like the corporate side management, or can you do like one-to-one for the normal fellow on the ground?
No, I say I'll do one-to-one for anybody. When I set up initially, it was guys in construction. Now, even through my TikTok, I've got so many clients, like female, male, from all different sectors, not just construction. But yeah, for me, depression, a lot of us have gone through trauma. Now, I get people saying to me after I've shared my story, "Oh, I've gone through something, but nowhere near as bad as what you've gone through." And it's like, no one person's trauma is any more or any less than the next person's. Trauma affects all of us in a different way. You know, we've all got our own story. We're all going through our own chapters. And it's, for me, it doesn't matter what it is you're going through. If we can have a conversation and that's all it takes to change your mindset, then I'm going to give anybody my time to have that conversation. Obviously, if it needs more than that and it needs a number of sessions, then that's where I'm at the moment. I'm in talks with companies like Mace and stuff and Amazon, or we're looking at getting me on like once a month on the site and giving me an office and saying to the guys or the teams on the site, Steve Kirby from SK Life Coach UK is here. If anybody wants to go and talk to him, he's in there. And then they can come and have that session.
Yeah, that's really important. It's good actually, because they do like a site nurse sometimes, don't they? Going and see a nurse. So
yeah, and I think bringing an outsider in, especially if they've seen the presentation and they know who I am and what I've gone through and how I've become who I am today, by seeing that then gives them the confidence to talk to me about their own issues.
Yeah. It's interesting actually, because I had an interview with a senior project manager for Lend-Lease, and he's a mental health first aider. And I said to him, like, because I was thinking in my head, if I'm walking about on site and I see this person every day, I ain't going to want to go and speak to him. And I asked him, do people talk to you? He said, yeah, you'd be surprised they do. But I think it would be good to have someone neutral, and that's good for there and now, but I think it'd be good to have someone neutral who can then help you progress even further long term.
Yeah, because I know myself, I've had conversations with guys who's drank excessively and got in a fight with a wife and, you know what I mean, done stuff they regret, and the world's fallen apart because the wife's gone off with a kid and they've gone to work the next day and their head's just all over. But they don't want to tell the mental health first aider that they drank a bottle of whiskey last night and lashed out at the missus, and because they're going to get marched off site and they feel bad for what they've done anyhow. So they don't want to open up to that to somebody who knows them within the business, because even though it's supposed to be confidential, people talk and guys don't trust other guys on site when it comes to that. So bringing in, and I ain't just talking about me, there's other guys out there doing what I'm doing, but bringing in an outsider to then speak to those guys, you've got more chance of them opening up and getting the help that's needed. And again, something else I talk about is, if your mental health in a good place, then your safety is at risk and the safety of your colleagues, because your mind's not focused on that job. Like, you're never going to be 100% focused anyhow, because the way the conscious mind, the way the mind works. But if you've got something going on with either the partner or financial problems or whatever it might be, and you're not dealing with it, then you're thinking about that while you're doing what it is you're doing. And if that's the case, your safety of yourself and colleagues are at risk.
Yeah.
So mental health it's important, especially within an high risk industry like construction, demolition, utilities.
Yeah, well, it's the biggest killer, isn't it? Do you do remote work?
Yeah.
Do you do remote hypnotism?
I've done a couple of sessions.
Yeah, now. Start running around.
Sleep.
Or something. It's a touchy one, isn't it? Because What if you hypnotise someone and then they just walk off and they're like, you
And
can't get anything?
yeah, the power goes off, and it's no. Hypnotherapy doesn't work like that. Like people confuse it with like street hypnosis, like stage hypnosis, where it's like.
Yeah.
But even in that, if the hypnotist just disappeared after a few minutes, you're gonna just consciously you're gonna come around. It just don't work like that. It's same as like if I sat with you and I said, right, close your eyes, imagine that all the muscles around your eyes are relaxing, you can't open your eyes. You can try to open your eyes, but realize you can't. You're going to try and open them and they're not going to open. But I ain't doing anything magic. It's just because of the wording that I've used. Like you're feeling the muscles relaxed and you're going to try and open them, but realize you can't. If I'm telling you to try to open them, you're not going to open them. You're just going to try. And that's as a coach. If any of my clients, like if they're drinking excessively or they need to go and do a bit more exercise, they need to go to the gym a little bit more, and they'll go, "Oh, I'll try," and it's like, no, you fucking won't try, because if you try, you're going to fail. You've got an opportunity to fail.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we don't do try. As a hypnotherapist, I use the word try because I want you to fail. I don't want you to open your eyes. I don't want you to be able to move your hand. So I'll say try and move your hand, and you'll be like, so yeah, that word try is we don't use it.
Yeah, no, that's good. That's a fair point. That's a fair point, actually. I don't want to keep you too much longer, but I haven't actually asked half of the questions I want to ask here. But we'll try and get on to a couple of important points here. So a couple of questions here. Do you think they're doing enough on mental health, particularly in construction?
I think a lot of companies, some companies are,
Yeah,
and some companies are just ticking a lot of boxes.
yeah,
And I think even I feel it myself. I'll get asked to speak somewhere, and it's kind of they give me a time and get there, and they'll be like, "All right," and then I'll do what I do, and then they kind of push me back out, and then get on with what they're doing, or get the lads back to work, and it's like it's not going to work like that. Do you know what I mean? I need to have that rapport. I need to like the talk I'm doing on Thursday. I'm not actually speaking till 12 o'clock, but I'm going to be there at around about 9 o'clock for the whole event, so that I can talk to everybody. I can mingle. They won't know who I am or why I'm there at that point, but at least I can have a few conversations. And then when I do get up there and talk, they know who I am. I've been there all day, been amongst them all day. Yeah. And then that also gives them more confidence to reach out to me afterwards, because we've had them conversations. And
I think I think you're right. A lot of companies are. I think a lot of companies are just doing it on the surface, like appearing to look good.
Well, again, it's like you touched on with mental health first aiders. Some companies think, we'll put a couple of people through a mental health first aid course and that's enough.
Yeah,
it's not enough. Every single employee should do that mental health first aid course.
Yeah,
or at least everyone should do the suicide awareness course. Do you know what I mean? That should be something else that's within all the tickets that we have to have on site. It's the biggest killer in construction, as you touched on earlier.
Yeah.
So why not put a course on for everybody?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Do you think they're doing enough on safety?
Safety is always going to be the same, because people are always going to cut corners and take risks. Yeah. So my accident was 14 years ago on the 11th of January. Not a lot has changed since. So you've still got companies that say, "Oh, where safety is our number one priority," or zero tolerance, and blah blah blah. Safety is not anybody's number one priority as a business. The business needs to make money. It needs to win contracts. They need to be able to pay people, and in order to do that, they've got to get the job done. Now, safety's got to be on par with that. But when it comes down to it, I've worked with some of the biggest tier 1 companies, and when something needs doing, like most of the time, you'll wait 2 or 3 days for a permit. But if something needs doing, you'll go in on a Saturday and do it on a pass. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? So this corner's going to be cut all the time. But again, a lot of the time, the companies are actually doing a lot more towards safety, But when it comes to PPE and risk, as humans, in order to save a bit of time or a bit of money, if we can get the job done, we'll take that risk.
Do you know what? Yeah, well, you talk about PP. I've been on jobs where they pull you for walking to the crane without your glasses on, but when it's windy and they want a big 14-meter long screen lifted up in the air when it's really windy, and they're like saying, "Jim, I need this done." They're like, "It's windy, mate. You're a project manager. You shouldn't be asking me that." Yeah, but can you just get it done for us? It's like, what's all that about? You know what I mean? It's like, fucking hell. What's more important, glasses or everyone been blown off of the building? Like, you know?
Yeah. All right, it's fine. Right, dogs are coming through.
Oh, okay.
Hold on one second.
Yeah. Gone out for a shit.
Crazy sausage dogs.
I won't keep you too much longer, but it's important that we touch on this. You said earlier your accident wasn't reported. Can you just touch on that a little bit?
Yeah. So basically, the client had their own on-site ambulance. It was a big client, big company, big organization. When the accident happened, they got me in the ambulance. They stripped me naked because it was ice cold water that I was trapped in. They didn't have a blanket or any clothes to fit me, so they put me in a paper hazmat suit. They then gave me a wet coat. They put a gauze on my head to stop the bleeding, cleaned me up a little bit, and then they took me in, sirens and flashing lights. I thought I was on my way to A&E. 2 minutes later, we pulled up in the car park, and they got me out of the ambulance and put me in a colleague's car and told him to take me to the minor injuries hospital on the council estate to get stitched up. We went to minor injuries, and then I don't remember a lot of this. It's just what I've been told. Went to minor injuries. I was waiting for a nurse for about half an hour, and then the nurse saw me, and her words was, "What the fuck are you doing here?" And the guy who took me explained that I'd been in an accident at work, and she said, "Well, nobody's rang up. I don't know nothing about it." She said, "You need to be at A&E. You need to be at hospital." So she was going to get me an ambulance, but she didn't, because the guy said I can get him there faster. And then as we were back in the car and going to the town centre to the hospital, his phone rang, and it was the manager from site. And he said, "Oh, what's happening?" So he said, "Oh, we've been to minor injuries, but it's worse than that. So I've got to take him to A&E. He needs a load of x-rays and a load of scans." And his words was, "For fuck's sake, make sure you're both on site tomorrow." So when I don't remember exactly, but when I was at hospital and they're trying to find me a bed and I want to get home to my kids, I think part of me also knew that I've just had Christmas. I've got no savings. I've got no money. I've got the manager telling me I've got to be on site tomorrow. I can't stay in hospital. I've got to get home. The next morning, I never expected to go into work because I was in agony at that point. Like, all the aches and pains was coming out, and I couldn't move. But one of the guys was sent from site with a minibus and told to get me back to site to give a statement. And he knocked on the door, got me up. He said, "Steve, I'm sorry, but you need to come on site. We need a statement." And I said, "I can't move. I can't physically move." He said, "Don't worry, I'll help you." And he literally carried me into the middle, put my arm over him, and got me into the minibus. Got me to site, swiped me in, took me to the office. The director came over from the principal contractor and he said, "Steve, I'm so sorry this has happened to you, but I need a statement." So I said, "Well, can I give it now? Because I need to go home. No, I mean, I can't be here." He said, "No, I need to speak to the other guys first. I'll speak to you this afternoon. It'll be about 1:30. Now, looking back, all of that was just to keep me on site.
Yeah.
And then I didn't know that part of the job. I was off work. I went home that day and I never went back for 7 months. And there was massive investigations going on. I had people coming to my house asking questions and taking statements. So I thought it'd all been investigated properly. But when I set up SK Life Coach UK and I got asked to speak for Skanska, I got in touch with the client because I went back and worked on there for 4 years. And I said to him, I said to the client, "Skanska's asked me to share my story. Can I have some information from the investigation?" And he said, "Steve, no, I'm sorry, but we're not going to want you to do it." And I said, "Well, why not?" And he said, "I'll get back to you." And he never got back to me. So somebody said, if you write to the HSC through the Freedom of Information, they'll give you the full investigation. So I wrote to the HSE, and then they said, sorry, we don't know anything about you. We don't know anything about an accident. It was never reported. Now, I ended up being invited onto site so they could explain how they reported it, which they said, because I didn't break any bones and because I went on site the next morning, they reported it as a dangerous occurrence rather than a RIDDO reportable incident, which when I spoke to the HSE again, it wasn't even reported as a dangerous occurrence. That was just to cover themselves. So basically, from the moment it happened, they chose to cover it up. If they'd have got me an ambulance, their ambulance couldn't leave site. If they'd have called me an ambulance, that ambulance would then call the police or would have then have informed the HSE. So they couldn't call me an ambulance because they knew it'd be investigated. They knew if I didn't go on site the next morning, it'd be a lost time incident. And again, the HSE would be involved. So they did everything they could to cover it up. And the only reason they'd do that, I know now, is because of monetary gain. Like the guys at the top of that business wouldn't have got their end of year bonus if they'd have had a lost time incident. So, but for me, why I share that bit in my presentation is because it's important. Because, like I said, months after that, Skanska had a fatality doing a similar job. Yeah. Now, if the HSE had have done their job and been able to investigate it, a lot more people across the UK, a lot more businesses would have known about it and learned from it.
Well, it's not only that. I mean, normally on site, even if there's an incident and HSE don't get involved, they normally put it across their other sites anyway. So I'll be on one site and you'll have something up on the board.
Yeah.
Something happen on another site. What can you learn from it? Blah, blah, blah. Yeah, so they've just done a proper slippery one. And you said about RIDDO there. I mean, I was looked into the RIDDO. I ain't got time to go into it and all, but that isn't even as the right stipulation they used anyway. So they've got that.
No, I think it has changed. It has changed over the years, but it still should have been reported no matter what.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
But yeah, and because so much time had passed when I got in touch with the HSE 6 years ago, because like 7 years had passed, the HSE couldn't go back into it, right. So they got away with it.
Yeah.
So yeah,
are they still running now, the company?
The client there's the principal contractor that took over from the contractor who I worked for, who I went on to work for 4 years. Yeah. They're still there. Right. And last year, a guy got run over by a forklift and hurt his legs. Like rough terrain forklift, scaffolding forklift, carrying scaffold poles. Sun was in his eyes, driving along, got too close to the van, didn't see the guy stood there, and the poles went into the back of his legs, trapped him against his van. Luckily, he didn't break anything, but he was in a lot of pain. They got their ambulance out again, like they did with me. They took him into the car park, they put him into a colleague's car, took him to minor injuries, got assessed, picked him up the next morning, put him on light duty for the next 3 weeks, sat in an office doing a job that wasn't his job, and then put a post up beginning of this year on LinkedIn saying we've gone 3 years without a lost time incident. And it's like, you've only gone 3 years because you're not fucking reporting them. You know what I mean? Yeah. So even though it's a different principal contractor, they're still doing, the culture's not changed.
Yeah, they're getting incentivized to hide it because of their bonus, aren't they? Because
yeah, it all comes down to that money, that bonus, that monetary gain. For me, you cannot reward safety with money because it's always going to encourage non-reporting.
Yeah. Yeah. So really, your message really in two parts is two equally important parts: is safety and mental health in everything that you do. So you go on sites now, didn't you? So do you see things that go on and shake your head?
There's bits, but I don't see enough. I don't get to go on site a lot. I can see bits. One of the number one things that really gets me is mobile phones.
Yeah.
Like I was on a job in Wales doing a talk, and there was a guy sat on a roller doing the new road, and he's on his phone on this roller, and it's like, what is he doing? And then there's another guy sat on a dumper, just while he's moving forward with using his knees to control the steering wheel, just sat on his phone. And I said to the contact who got me on there, "Aren't you going to say anything?" And he's like, "Well, we do, but they just do it anyhow." And I was like, "Well, why don't you like use a card system or something? Like warn them and yellow card, and then if they do it again, red card, they're off." And he's like, "Because we won't fucking have anybody left." He said, so I said, "I guarantee you, by the time you, like 2 or 3 of them had done it, everybody would start listening because it's the job, it's a livelihood." And I said, when it comes to safety culture, a lot of businesses focus on the boots on the ground, but it's got to start from the top of that tree. It's got to be start up there and come down. And if it isn't that way, if you're going to let people get away with stuff, you're going to have incidents on your site.
Yes, that's right. And like you say, reporting is equally as important as well. People, for many reasons, I mean, like simple reasons, like something happens to you, you don't report it. Let's say further down the line, you get problems from that injury or whatever, then it's not reported and nothing can come back from it.
Yeah, exactly. There's nothing there, is there? I did it years ago. When I was in demolition, I was crushing concrete and it was summer, so I had my mask kind of half off. And it's something, again, I talk about PPE and wearing it properly, but we don't, like when you're on site, if it's really hot and uncomfortable, you'll have a breather. So I had all the proper gear on, visor and everything, but we're crushing this concrete and there wasn't a lot of steel in it. So I'm just stood up there in a cloud of dust, just letting it go in. And I'd take my mask off just to try and breathe properly. And then I found out that what we'd actually been crushing was a lot of buried asbestos. And we'd been crushing it for a good few days. And basically what it was a load of like the big tanks, the plinths that there was sat on. When them plinths was put in, a lot of the old asbestos from the old buildings in like the 70s or whatever had been buried underneath. So when our lads was breaking them out and digging them out and then putting them into the dump trucks, they're then taking them along the site road with dust everywhere, then bringing them to the crusher. And then when they actually stopped the job and brought an asbestos team in to come and assess it, there was asbestos everywhere. So me and a few of the other lads actually rang the HSE ourselves and give our names, because we said in 15, 20 years' time, we might be struggling because of this.
Yeah.
So it is important to report, even if you've got to do it yourself.
Yeah,
it's important. And if you're working for a company who won't report it, then you don't need to be working at that company, because your health and your well-being comes before anything.
Yeah. I read a statistic the other day about the amount of people who don't, or the amount of incidents that don't get reported, even by the people that happens to. And
I'll keep banging the drum when it comes to safety, behavioral safety, mental health, the importance of reporting. Like, I never used to add that part into my presentation. It'd come up as a question, like, was there an investigation, or was anyone prosecuted? And then I'd explain, no, because it wasn't reported. And then but then someone told me I need to add that into the presentation. And I said, yeah, but by doing that, companies that are actually doing that else won't want me to speak for them, because their guys are like, well, these have done that.
Yeah.
And I was told that, no, I need to share that, because it's not just the boots on the ground that I'm talking to. It's management from the very top level I want to get through. And if they think it's all right to not report something, at least by hearing my story, they get the full impact of it, and they might, again, change that mindset. And that's, for me, that's what I'm doing. I'm trying to change people's mindset around all of it.
It's the same as my previous guest. He was crushed by a brick wall. It was a bricklayer. Wind blew it over, crushed him because of improper bracing that they use, scaffold boards and whatever. And he said it used to happen all the time. Walls just go over all the time and never get reported, ever. So same again, these things got reported. It might never have happened, you know.
Yeah.
So there we go.
That's why I say, like, the guy who, a few months after my incident in London, who passed away, pipe failed at 3 bar, died instantly. if my accident had been investigated and it had been put out there, they may have done things different. I ain't saying they would have, and it would still be here, but there's a chance. And I know that me now sharing my story, people are learning from it, and they are going to go away. And if they find themselves in a similar situation, or they found themselves in a scenario where something don't feel right, they're going to remember my story, and they're going to be like, right, no, I am putting myself at risk. We stop the job.
The work you do now, do you think if you hadn't have had the accident, do you think you still would have been doing something like this now?
No, if the accident had never have happened, I was a site supervisor. I just done my triple STS. I was looking at doing my site manager ticket, and then I'd probably gone on to do my NEBOSH and gone down the safety route. That was something that I always had in my mind, was doing my general certificate and then building on that. So I was always kind of safety conscious in a way. I always had that in my head. I never just wanted to just carry on being a digger driver. I wanted to move on from that.
Yeah.
But yeah, who knows where I'd be today?
Yeah, I don't know. Like yourself, I believe that things happen for reasons. So I think if it wasn't the accident, it might have been something else that led you this way.
Yeah,
Obviously
I remember I used to do a lot of training at home. Just dumbbells and stuff. Like if I didn't go to the gym, I'd train at home. And I always had it in my head. Like I didn't know nothing about life coaching or anything. Like in America, everybody's got a life coach, but it's not so big over here, or not as it's growing now, but it was nowhere near. I'd never heard of one over here before. But I never wanted to be a personal trainer, but I always had something in my head about helping people.
Yeah.
And when I'd work out, because I felt I had to look in shape, I had to be the part in order for people to take me seriously. Like nobody wants somebody helping them who don't look like they practice it themselves. And yeah, like I say, it was maybe always there.
Yeah.
I just never really locked into it. And then, but one thing that really opened my mind was just reading. I never used to read. And then when I started reading every day, the world around me changed. And yeah, I recommend reading to anybody, especially stuff when it comes to like mindfulness and just changing the way you think. If you can start seeing things from a different perspective, your whole world kind of changes with it.
I absolutely agree with that. Reading, two things there. So reading for that, and also reading helps you become more articulate, which helps you for your speaking.
Yeah.
But also with the spiritual side as well. A lot of people have this misconception of spirituality. Everyone's got their own definition of spirituality, I think. And for me, it's about looking into yourself. Really, it's not all about all the woo-woo stuff and the spirits and all that stuff. It's about looking into yourself and being self-conscious, mindful of things, being present, and all that sort of stuff.
It helps even when it comes to your emotions. And I used to get angry really quick. Like I say, in my younger days, I got in a lot of fights, and if I was driving and someone cut me up, I'd be like, "Oh, fuck," I'd get angry. Yeah. Now I just take a breath, and then I'm like, "You don't know what's going on in their world." Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And if someone's stressed or pushes by me, instead of turning around and going, "What?" I'm like, "Are you all right?" And to me, I get told I'm not the most approachable guy. Like I've got a baggy t-shirt on for a change today, but I'm like 15 stone and covered in tattoos and bald head, and so I'm not the most approachable guy. Yet when people get talking to me, they're like, "Oh, I wasn't expecting you to be like this." And I did a talk a few weeks ago, and it's happened twice now where I've done a talk and a guy has come over to me and said, "You don't look like the type of person that had struggled with mental health." And I've just looked at him and gone, "Why? What does somebody look like who struggles with a mental health?" I said, "What I think you're trying to say is I don't look like the type of guy that would admit to struggling with mental health." Yeah. And they've kind of gone, "Yeah, that's probably what I'm trying to say." Yeah. And it's like, because I look like I've got that tough guy look in a sense, which I don't give myself, but it's what I've been told. And tough guys don't talk about it, do we?
That's right.
Whereas
right.
I do talk about it, and I'm open about it, and I cry about it, and I'm vulnerable. And to me, that's how it should be.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll leave it on that. Although I'm going to do some quick fire questions actually before we go. Yeah, just a little something I usually do, not always. Quick fire questions. All right, you ready?
Yep.
I asked this for previous guests actually. From up your way, he's a northerner from Yorkshire. Let's see if you give the same answer. Are Yorkshiremen tight asses?
I what? Tight asses?
Yeah.
No.
No? Okay, he said yes.
No. No, I happily share my pennies.
Okay, that's good. Aren't Bessie's or homemade Yorkshire puddings?
Do you know what? I would say homemade normally, but for Christmas dinner we had Auntie Bessie's and it was quite good.
Nothing wrong with them, is there?
No.
What's your biggest fear?
My biggest fear is probably, it's a tough one, but being alone for a long time. Like,
really?
I like my own space.
Yeah.
But if everyone just disappeared around me,
yeah,
that'd be my biggest fear.
That's interesting. Okay, interesting. Have you ever really fucked up at work and not told anyone?
Yeah, on a few occasions.
Not going to elaborate, no.
No, there's times where I've done a leveling job, so we're putting a temporary car park in, and all I had to do was level it and get it rolled and piece of paste, and I just couldn't level it. I just couldn't work the digger that day, and it was all over. And no matter how much I tried, it just got worse. So instead of taking me a few hours like it should have, it took me a full day. I've also hit water mains and everything you normally come across in demolition and construction.
Yeah. Have you ever tipped a digger or dumper over?
I've nearly tipped a digger. I got stuck in the mud once, so I went in a soggy area in a I think it was a 22 tonner, and my tracks, no matter which way I went, my tracks just kept getting deeper and deeper and deeper. So we had to get two other diggers to come over and dig me out, which was eventful. But no, I've seen a few like Moxie dump trucks go over, rare tipping dump trucks go over, but they're designed to go over. Yeah. But then when they do go over, there's a big investigation, and it's like, yeah, but that's what they're designed to do.
Well, I have tipped a digger over, and I have tipped a dumper down a trench, but we won't go into that. If you saw someone on site doing something stupid, would you stop them?
I would, 100%, and that's something when I do my talk, it's something I encourage. And you get a lot of guys just messing about, having a bit of laugh and having a banter and putting cones on each other's heads and stuff like that. But that type of horseplay can lead to an accident, and it's everybody on site should have the confidence to speak to each other. I've had a lot of supervisors that I've worked with in the past, and guys have been taking the piss and not wearing the PPE or throwing mud balls and shit like that. And I'm like, are you going to go and tell him? And he's like, I ain't telling him. And I'm like, why? Because he fucking hit me. And it's like, but as a supervisor, that's your role to approach him and to talk to him. But yeah, for me, it don't matter who it is. If someone's doing something and it's not safe or it's not right, I'll talk to them in the right way. I mean, I'm not going to go, oh, you fucking get down. But it'll be, excuse me, mate, can I just have a chat? And everyone should have the confidence to do that.
Absolutely. Confidence, that's it. That's what it's about. That's it, mate. All done.
That was easy.
Cheers for your time, man. Was that all right?
It's spot on. Yeah. Hopefully anybody watches it and takes anything away from it, then it's all good.
How can people find you? You did mention it earlier. Can you just remind us?
SK Life Coach UK. So Steve Kirby, Life Coach UK. If you stick that into Google, all of my social medias come up, my website, LinkedIn. I use LinkedIn a lot for business. I also use Instagram and even TikTok now. So
Okay.
fair bit of mental health stuff on TikTok.
Yeah.
LinkedIn's more about talks and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So I've got a website, but it's just a generic one that I've designed myself 6 years ago. I've currently got somebody building me a more professional one, shall we say.
Right. Okay.
So yeah, it's Google SK Life Coach UK or Steve Kirby. Again, Spotify, Apple, YouTube. There's other podcasts on all of them as well.
None of them are as good as this one, though.
None of it. I've enjoyed this. It's been a good chat.
Nice one. Same here, mate. I appreciate it. Take care then, Steve. I didn't say Merry Christmas to you, so Merry Christmas now and have a Happy New Year.
Yeah, well, all the best for 2025. And
yeah, mate. Nice one.
Let's hope it's amazing for everyone and all these crazy wars in the world stop and the world becomes a better place.
So now, here's a couple of images of the pipe that Steve was working on at the time of the incident, plus a couple of images of the work he does now.